Hello, and this is my creative research project for ancient mythology and art. The purpose of my research project is to look at four mythical creatures found in Chinese culture and create four pieces of artwork based off my interpretations from ancient text and modern interpretations. The first mythical creature I found while researching was a creature named Nuwa. I was always very interested in how snakes are depicted, especially with a Judeo Christian background. And what's very interesting is she is also very much related to the creation of man, sort of like Adam and Eve. However, she was the creator of humans in a lot of Chinese creation myths, where she mixed yellow mud with water and then created multiple dolls, and those were the first people to ever walk Earth. With that, she became a very divine mother figure in Chinese culture and was worshipped as a protector of both life and marriages. She was a symbol of fertility, sexuality, creating life, and marriage. It was also believed that snakes had sort of a phallic symbolism for her ability to create life and her role in protecting it. She has a few different depictions from both ancient and modern works, some of them having a full snake body and just a human head, some being more half-half, and then some being a full human. I decided to do multiple depictions of this when figuring out my design for her. I also wanted to add a headband and flowing Chinese dress because I saw that a lot in the depiction she had. And I ended up going with the third sketch as I thought it did the best job showing her sort of gentle motherly figure and also just had a more strong composition overall. With rendering, I decided to use a more rough sort of digital brush as I thought that would best represent some of the artistic works I saw when researching ancient Chinese culture. With her snake body, I decided to go with a more orange-yellow color because that was the only depiction I really saw, along with different stripes and speckles. With her dress, I decided to go with a more blue-yellow look, as I thought that did a good job representing her symbolism as a life creator and a mother, while also contrasting a lot with her orange snake body. Researching her was very, very interesting, especially, and also quite easy compared to the other three, as she is very well known and very well worshipped in a lot of different ancient dynasties, like the Tang Dynasty and the Ming Dynasty. And it was really interesting being able to see the ways in which snakes were depicted in Chinese culture and seeing them not just depicted as pure evil, but rather as an important protector of life. So dragons were always a first pick for me when doing this project. They're one of the most recognizable Chinese mythical creatures out there, and when doing more research, I found out that there are, if not thousands, of different depictions of dragons, and so that sort of put a little bit of strain on me figuring out which one I personally wanted to depict, and I decided to go with a dragon named Ying Long. Not only because he was mentioned a lot with Nuwa in terms of Chinese culture's relation to snakes, but also he's one of the few depictions of a winged dragon in Chinese culture, so I thought that would be an interesting diversion, as a lot of Chinese dragons have been well known for being wingless. So Yinglong was also very prevalent in Neolithic culture. He was best known in relation to a person named the Yellow Emperor, which was a semi-mythical person who has been accredited to starting Chinese civilizations, and has also been accredited to making a lot of different ceramics and literature and art. Yinglong was a friend to the Yellow Emperor and helped him throughout his journeys. He had powers of rain and storms and would use that to help the Yellow Emperor when he was in trouble or he was getting attacked. And with that, he became sort of a totem in his own right, where people would draw symbols of Yinglong as sort of a way to try to get rain. Stories of the Yellow Emperor also kind of told about how dragons came to be. They originally started out as water snakes, and then throughout thousands of years, they would turn into these giant, majestic dragons, going from the water up to the sky. Some of them being as old as 3,000 years old. And Yinglong was considered a very old dragon as well, one of the oldest ones found in Chinese myth. So out of the 4 creatures I did, Yinglong was definitely the hardest in terms of finding physical depictions of him, even though he was definitely an important figure in a lot of, like I said, the Neolithic period. He just didn't really have a lot of depictions, and trying to find some, I would either find modern depictions of him, or it would either be of different dragons. And so my hands were a little tied with trying to find depictions, but I think overall I was able to find enough. His design was also sort of tricky, as he, I wanted to make him look big and grand, while also trying to fit him as much into the canvas as I could. Luckily, I feel like the first one ended up being cohesive and detailed enough that I can go forward with it. So in contrast to Nuwa, I decided to use a much smoother brush for him because with a lot of dragon depictions, they had a lot of very exaggerated and detailed features, and so I really wanted a brush that would complement that. Most writings about him said that he was depicted as a yellow dragon, and so I tried to use that, and while also trying to make him big and grand. I had to use some inspiration from a lot of modern depictions, but overall I think I still did a good job balancing out and not making sure it wasn't solely just modern interpretations. With doing a Chinese dragon, I think it was very interesting that I was able to use a winged one, as it sort of went against a lot of, modern views and interpretations of Chinese culture, and I think it's very interesting to see some of the few winged exceptions and sort of his role and everything with that. So nine-tailed foxes were another creature I was already aware of and was definitely interested in trying to depict, especially found in Fantastic Creatures. However, with doing more research, I sort of found out that they are not only in Chinese culture, but also Japanese and Korean. This created an issue with finding resources and depictions, as I needed to make sure that they were from China and not something like Japan. However, I am also quite interested to thinking about sort of the ways in which Chinese and Japanese depictions potentially influenced each other, as these cultures are already sort of intertwined in some of their origins and practices, so I would not be surprised if this sort of also sort of applied to the nine-tailed fox, or the Jiwei Hu, which is what the Chinese nine-tailed fox is called. They were originally praised in the beginning of ancient Chinese culture as a sign of good fortune, and that their fur and flesh were able to heal people from poison. And then with Taoism, their dawn and dusk sleep cycles gave them the idea of being metamorphical, as they would be awake during changing periods during the time, different when the balance of things started to shift. And with Taoism, they actually started to get a little bit more of a negative connotation and eventually became known as almost succubus and bad omens, where basically they would transform into beautiful men and women and then try to deceive and trick them. With women, they were told to have made them lose their minds, and then with men, they were depicted draining their health until they eventually died. Depending on the specific time period you see in Chinese culture, it sort of depends on the positive and or negative connotation they had. For the depiction, I had more of a fun time with sort of a mischievous look, as they're known for being troublemakers. The only real issue I had with designing the nine-tailed fox was simply, obviously, just getting all of the tails into the shot, which was just really tricky because I really wanted to make sure they had all 9. I probably unintentionally got a little bit of inspiration from some of the Japanese depictions of nine-tailed fox, which are called kasunis. But I feel like in a way that would be very interesting, as it would kind of show the way that Chinese culture and Japanese culture can kind of intertwine in the way they are seen and the way they depict things. I think the first piece out of the 3 sketches I did definitely did the best job at doing that. With the final design, it was really difficult really doing much with the coloration, as nine-tailed foxes are usually just white with a little bit of red in their eyebrows and tails. So I really just focused it a lot more on adding fun details and just overall making the design look like emphasizing the red. This creature was definitely a lot more confusing to research than I originally intended. However, it was also very interesting to see sort of the nuanced views foxes had on Chinese culture, and just seeing the way that this one specific mythical creature is not only important in Chinese culture, but is also a multicultural sort of phenomenon. Now, with the Chinese phoenix, I was personally very excited to try to research them, because with phoenixes, they've always been a personal favorite. And so I was very just excited to learn more about them, especially in a Chinese context. But what was very interesting to me, as the more I researched, the more of that fiery symbol of rebirth phoenix that I always knew of actually turned out to be a more Greek and Egyptian depiction of the mythical creature, and more Chinese writings were actually significantly different from what I already knew. So instead of this fiery bird, the Fuang Hong, which is the Chinese phoenix, was an extremely colorful and vibrant bird. They were considered the king of over 360 bird species. They originally had a male-female balance, where Feng was the male version and then Huang was the female. However, throughout Chinese culture, this sort of transitioned into mainly being a female depiction. It was also a very important symbol of just grace and beauty. And what was very interesting is that they're very much connected to symbolisms with dragons, whereas dragons were very much a depiction of male emperors. Alongside them would be Fuang Hong, which would be a depiction of female rulers or female empresses. And each certain part of their body had a different symbol of an important value. Righteousness would be on their wings, trust would be on their stomach, and others such as the symbol of benevolence, courtesy, virtue. These overall signs sort of showed a symbol of marital peace and a general balance between rulers. Like Yinglong, it was sort of difficult trying to find a good composition for him, and also just depictions, as, like I mentioned, the fiery Greek phoenix was also a very popular depiction of this creature. It was sort of hard to fit everything into this, especially because of just how detailed the feathers are, but I think overall I did a decent design. I was debating between a front and back view, seeing which one would potentially give the most details, and I think the front view was more defining as this big, sort of important creature, but still, I think, added enough detail to warrant using. Personally, the use of vibrant colors was a little difficult with this creature, because frankly, I thought it sort of looked like a parrot, but hopefully, with a lot of the small details, I was able to do it right. I wish I could have made the wings a little bit more spread out, but that would have been really hard to do without either having them cut off or having to make the Fang Hong significantly smaller. I did also make sure to add the symbols for things like benevolence and trust on their respective body parts, so hopefully that still conveys, although unfortunately I wasn't able to do all of them. With this creature, it was definitely a much different road than I expected, especially when I came in mind with a more Greek and Egyptian connotation. However, it was still extremely interesting seeing the ways in which Chinese phoenixes were different and their entirely different purpose and sort of symbolisms they had versus the rebirth fiery Greek phoenix that I always knew and loved. These were the multiple sources I used with finding all of these mythical creatures. I hope that this research project has helped you gain a better understanding of Chinese mythical creatures, and I hope I did a good job depicting them. I personally was able to clear up a lot of misconceptions I had, and now I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of a lot of Chinese myths that I had a lot of misconceptions with. Thank you.